So one of the things that I think is absolutely magical is the idea of just doing incremental things every day and pursuing those particular incremental things. I've said that a lot on this podcast, but I strongly believe in that in terms of just little incremental changes, little positive changes, moving you in a certain direction, and how magical it actually is over the long run. Now, you can leverage those particular things by choosing where you're going to go. But we can sort of imagine the path that we take in life as kind of what's called a random walk process. It's kind of a little difficult to sort of imagine, but think of it as like a stock market or stock market ticker. Sometimes it kind of wanders up, sometimes they kind of wander down, right? And what you look at is in the day to day, the wandering doesn't happen that much. It's kind of incremental, right? Some things kind of go really wild in a day to day, but most things is pretty incremental, kind of boring stuff, kind of ticking up a little bit, ticking down a little bit. Sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. But we can imagine our life in terms of this random walk process where you're kind of wandering around, um, thinking of where you're going to go. And often, for the most part, on average, I think a lot of people do move up over the course of their lifetime. They kind of tick up, as they're pushing things. Sometimes that doesn't happen, right? But I think a lot of people, on average, that's kind of what GDP growth is over time, is that on average everybody's kind of ticking up a little bit. Sometimes people kind of go haywire, right? You get thrown in jail, all that kind of stuff. But we can imagine that. But in the day to day, if you look at it in the long run, right? You look at 20 years, 30 years, we'll see this tremendous growth over time for most people, right? Like where you started out, where you began, and where you end is often pretty remarkable in terms of what happens in your life, right? And the people that have greater growth, it doesn't necessarily matter. I don't really care so much about that, but what you look at is over time we're all kind of growing, which is a wonderful thing, right? And I think that's what we're talking about. The average in the meantime is a wonderful thing. And I want to just point out in the day to day, if you zoom in every day, right? If you go sort of from 30-year span, you'll see this tremendous growth over time. But then you zoom in on the day to day, in fact, nothing really happens. It really does not ever seem like things are changing. And this is true of almost all processes in life. In the day to day, and particularly for human scales, right? It's different scales for every kind of organism that's out there. Cellular level things will happen a lot quicker, but on the day to day, things just don't change. In fact, many times it goes down, and you feel like you're feeling awful, and nothing's working out, and and in fact, the days where you're going through the greatest growth is where you feel the worst, where you often feel tremendously bad, right? Imagine when I work out, right? And I have a good workout the night before. That's when my body is repairing itself. I'm growing, my muscles are growing, and all of those kind of things. But the next day, I feel terrible, awful. I'm grumpy, I'm irritable, nothing seems to work, all of those kind of things. The first time you go and work at something, you're just really miserable. But that's the moment where you're having the most amount of growth, right? And I want you to sort of think about that in the day to day. It doesn't necessarily have to feel pleasant. You don't have to feel good every day. I think that's kind of a bit of a myth in terms of how we understand what reality is. You don't have to be necessarily perfectly happy every day. What matters is in the long run that there's little incremental changes that you can look at and sort of zoom out and say, hey, I've actually done something and made some progress. I've stepped a little ahead than what I did before. And I want you to sort of reflect on that and think about what it means to take these incremental steps, one little day at a time, and acknowledge that it is not going to feel good. You're not going to get a lot of progress. Things are just really slow. And depending on what activities that you choose, right, some things are slower than others. And it doesn't mean that you're necessarily bad or problematic. It's just a slower process, right? And we forget about those. I think about in my engineering undergrad, right? I was taking, I almost double majored in sociology. It was a couple courses short, and I just didn't want to spend the extra year to finish that off. But, I took it something like 13 extra courses in sociology, and I needed two more. Uh, well, the courses that I took, I could have took really easy courses, but the courses I took were theory, sociological theory and those kind of things, really kind of on the harder side of things. Well, when I was doing that, it actually wasn't nearly that pleasant, right? Like it was hard. I had to study more, all those kind of things. It was really rigorous. I could have took a lot of easy courses, but me as a person, and yes, I had worse grades by taking those theory courses. I could have took a bunch of really much more easier ones. But me as a person, I grew and I became a better person. I understand the world a little bit better, right? I want you to sort of think about that, right? If you view the world, and I think training and doing fitness and when I was in high school made a big difference in how I understood the world. Um, the pain that you feel temporarily often equates to a tremendous amount of growth in the long run. And you can get to a lot more gains. You could feel better in the long run by experiencing some unpleasantness, right? You don't want a lot of unpleasantness, but some unpleasantness where you're not okay every day is okay. And working through this, you don't have to be completely happy-go-lucky every single day, but you can work through some of these things as long as it's manageable and you're growing and you're taking these steps forward, right? And you're actively trying to engage in the world, being positive, trying to do good things. That's what matters. And I think we need to sort of change our idea on what progress, success, all these kind of things mean in the world. It doesn't mean prosperity and smiling and all that kind of stuff all the time, the sort of, happy index. But it means doing something that you're okay with, right? And I think, and that you're actually getting growth. Sometimes you do things that are really incredibly hard and you don't get any growth. But you have to sort of look back and say, hey, I chose that to actually grow in expectations to grow. And that didn't work out for me, and that's okay. And I should be happy doing that particular thing. So that's what I want to stay and have you think about is zoom out and look at the large amount of progress you make, but then also realize in the zoom in that it's okay. You could be in the dirt, you could do grinding away at things, and that is okay too. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day.